Well, thank you very much. It's a humbling honor. I look around the room and I see people I know that ought to be up here giving this talk. And I won't tell you how old I am, but Martin and I went to high school together. And people have been asking us when we're going to retire. And we both said, well, from what? Because we weren't really sure. And so I'm going to change my comments a little bit today because along the lines of what Byron asked, I want to read this to you real quick because it's something that was given to me, I was right out of high school. And it says, the master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play. And I'll apologize for the male pronouns here. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both. So my grandmother gave me that when I graduated from high school and started college. And growing up, as Martin would know, our parents would drag us, and grandparents would drag us to give, we'd go on, give baskets for Thanksgiving out in the rural areas around Moore to needy families. And so, little, you ask questions about, well, what's this all about? And my grandmother and my grandfather and my dad and everybody in my family said, well, you're just paying your community rent. And so I never really thought much more about that. You just pay your community rent. This is what you do. And so growing up, my parents were really young. They were in high school when I was born. And so my grandmother, my patriarchal grandmother, really she says she raised us all at once, me and my parents, everybody. And so she was always this wise person. Later in life, we made a book, laminated her sayings. And as we were doing that, somebody said, well, do you have a release to put those in there? And I said, well, no, because these were all my grandmother's sayings. They said, well, if you're on the right track, if you're on the right track and you don't keep moving, you'll get run over, which was a wise thing my grandmother said. I found out she was quoting Will Rogers. Will Rogers said that. And then she said, things may come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustle. And most of you know that was not my grandmother. That was Abraham Lincoln that said that. So all growing up, we just thought how wise she was. But I have found something she would say that I haven't found quoted by anybody else. And she would always say, no matter what question you asked her, she would say, well, compared to what? And you'd say, well, what do you think about this? Well, compared to what? And my brother and I would spend time thinking about things we could ask her where she couldn't answer, well, compared to what? But if you think about it, if everything you approach is, well, compared to what? Well, do you like that? What's going on? How does that work? Where are you in your life? Well, compared to what? And I think that gave my brother and I a real dose of maybe a discernment. Like, well, how does it make a difference? How does that work? And so one time I had been dating a girl that my grandfather particularly liked, and we broke up. And so, he said, well, where's Tracy? Where's this girl? I said, well, she just had this and she had that about her. And so he reached over and pats my arm and he says, well, Chuck, when you do find the perfect girl, we just have to hope she's not looking for the perfect guy, So later I find out that the saying really is, those who want perfect friends have no friends. Okay? And so as my life began to unfold, this sense of paying your community rent was really just woven into us. There was no choice in that. And so, but what I also learned is that people, they do want perfect friends, and they want to be with people that they believe are a certain way, or they want to be with people, they want to be able to have a simple selection. I just want to choose you because you look great and you're awesome and you've got a great reputation, and I just want to hook up with you and let's just go do things. And then quickly people learn that, well, people have faults. There's things that don't work right. And so what I learned early on is that no one is willing to buy you without test driving you. And Gareth, he can take a nap now. He's heard this 100 times. But no one is going to buy you without test driving. And we all are in charge of our brand. We all have a personal brand. And so we establish how we want to be perceived and how we want to be received by other people. And so as much as we'd like to have everyone just take us at face value and believe what I say, that's just not how the world works. People want to watch you. They want to interact with you. They want to have an idea about what you're going to be like, what it's going to be like to deal with you. And so we talk a lot about the double bottom line, the triple bottom line. Well, my feeling is just like in the poem that you heard, where to that person they're doing both. They're both working and playing. They're both doing the things they need to do for their own personal brand as well as creating influence on others. They're advancing their own business at the same time, helping others. And so if you think about all this as a compared to what, multiple bottom lines, how am I going to be able to put myself out in the world in a way that people will buy me. They'll buy what I'm selling. They'll buy into the ideas I have. And my belief is that there has to be a way for people to test drive you. And my opinion is there is no better way to let somebody else test drive you than to volunteer with them. Do you show up on time? Are you active? Are you the secretary, are you the treasurer, are you the chairperson of your committee or your board or whatever it is? And when your time comes to lead, do you take it gladly and willingly? Are you able to assemble others around you? Are you able to make those other people? Sometimes most of you in the room I know are on boards and commissions and committees, and everybody has that person. You always have that person. Can you operate your meeting in a way that respects that person, yet helps your organization move forward? Because other people notice that. You're kind and gentle and thoughtful to those people who everybody else would like to have not come back for the next meeting. But you find a way to include them, but not let them dominate the situation or dominate the. So then when it comes time to offer yourself, whether it's your business, whether it's what you're trying to do with your life, and somebody has had the opportunity to test drive you, you show up late, you miss the meetings, you don't come, when it's your turn, I got a headache that day. Well, I don't think anybody's going to buy you. But if you put yourself in those positions, and my dad, when we were all raised, Lombardi time. Well, if you're 10 minutes early, that means you're 5 minutes late. So when it's time to go, whether it's pick up trash, Larry, or no matter what it is, be there early, be happy, be chipper. And then that time will come, I promise you it will. And it happens to us, Gareth, all the time, where we're not there for the bank. We're there because we want to make sure that we're making a positive impact. A community bank is like, it can't work without a healthy community. We say that, if our communities, Noble, Moore, Norman, Westmore area, if they ever get a cold, we're going to get the flu. We're going to get the flu because we know that healthy community banks will not survive without a healthy community. So that's a critically important part of what we have to do. So that means that somebody has to say, well, gee, I'll go try Republic out. I'll go through the 8 miles of hooey and 25 forms and run a pen out of ink to try out Republic. Well, they're not going to do that. They're just not going to do that. I'm not going to change banks just because you're asking me to. But again, if you're on the committee, you're on the work, you're out there, and people say, well, when they're in charge of the treasurer's report, it usually balances, and the checking account's got the right amount of money in it, or it was a fundraiser, and they can usually figure out how to lead the way or use contacts to do those kinds of things. And I think that is how you're able to have somebody else buy what you're selling, whether it's what's yourself, whether it's your vision, whether it's your plan, whether it's your business, whether it's something that's important to you. And so I would encourage all of you to look at those opportunities as not just, well, I'm volunteering on this board. And then if everybody on your board or your commission or your Boy Scout troop or whatever it is you're doing, basketball, get the goals the right height. I'm going to use that one from now on. It's easier to win the game if the goals are at the right height. So I do think that that's really impactful. And so years and years ago at Republic, we're a growing bank, and we're hiring people all the time. And we're very proud of Republic's investment in the United Way, as Byron knows. And so we have a big United Way drive in our banks, and we have agency people come in, and so we rocked along. And since the beginning, I came to Republic, we had 9 employees, and we were in a modular building. So that's how long ago. That was 1986. We had a year there where we had a couple of young people that didn't give to United Way. And we're not going to ever twist anybody's arm. It wasn't so much, I want to make sure that, if you can't afford it, I'll give on your behalf, which is kind of cheating for 100% participation. But if you really have a problem with United Way, I really want to know about that. I mean, do you have an opinion or something that's a problem? And these few bankers just said, no, that's just not what we do. We just don't do that. And I remember sitting there, and we were nice, and they were nice, and just not our cup of tea. And so, my partner and I were talking about that afterwards, Chairman Pape, and he said, I know you can't ask this question, but how could we find out the people we hire, would they be willing to give to United Way? Yes or no? And so our HR people kind of came up with a series of questions that aren't too veiled, but to say, do you volunteer? If so, where? What? Why? Why does it matter to you? We try to give them the answers a little bit about, so people can get to know me better and learn me better, and that I realize I'm an example, and I realize that people are watching me. No matter what I do, they're watching me, and I need to make sure that I'm that example. Often you don't get that clear an answer, but I do think that we just have said we're only going to hire people that we believe would donate to the United Way, and that's a real oversimplification. But when you start separating applicants into those piles, we've decided that Garrett is an amazing banker, and he does a wonderful job at his office, and he's a leader. He trains our other bankers. And before he came to work at Republic, he worked at the Greek restaurant in Norman. Never worked at a bank a day in his life. And so we've decided that we'll invest in systems to teach people how to be a banker. We can in no way teach them how to have that servant spirit, a giving attitude. I've never been successful at being able to teach that. But I think if you seek out those people that have that sense about them, and they understand that they're going to be, I've been told this to be true, the number one sport in America is boss watching. Okay? The number one sport in America is boss watching. At my place, our bank is along one wall of a 4-story office building, and that wall is all glass. And so in the morning, I try to get there before anybody else does, but sometimes I'm, out of the bank early or something, come in. I know the minute I open my car door and I step on the pavement that there are hundreds of eyes in all those windows looking at, he's here, he showed up. And so if you know that, it's not a secret, and you don't have to be brilliant. But so where do I park? I park in the farthest away parking spot in the entire parking lot. And I search for every single scrap of paper in the parking lot I can find. I pick up all the paper. It needs to be picked up, but I also know all those eyes are watching everything that you do. Right, Martin? I mean, they watch everything you do. So if you're a volunteer and you're from your organization, that's like I said, I see lots of people here that are in lots of, people look at you. They watch what you're doing. They see your impact on your immediate circle or on your community, and they watch you. Well, how did you get to be that? How did you get to be, the first and only person in Oklahoma? How did that happen? And people will study you. Well, if you know they're studying you, now you have what I would think of as that compared to what advantage? Well, compared to that, or compared to this, compared to this, compared to this. Well, those people will choose. They'll say, no, I want to be like that. How do you get to run your own firm, your own marketing firm? How do you get to do that? Well, if you show them every day, they can learn from that. So my grandmother, a couple of more quick sayings at the end. My dad grew up, and he would say every time I'd get fussy or I'd get impatient, or, he would say, Chuck, you got to leave happy tracks. And then something would happen, and we'd be involved in something. And, my dad, some of you know Charlie, my dad, and he is long-suffering. You cannot even describe him as long-suffering. I mean, he's past long-suffering. And boy, I'm just tired. I'm like, and he'll say, that's not happy tracks. You're not leaving happy tracks. So I think that's a good measure. Every time you have an encounter, touch somebody, be involved in something, and I walk away thinking, okay, did I leave happy tracks? There's an old story that says, back used to take the Queen Mary to New York and back to London. And then they invented airplanes. And so they would take the Queen Mary one way and fly on the airplane back. And so the person is on the Queen Mary, and one of the kind of the fellows that have been there for a while, he says, well, how much should I tip here on the Queen Mary? And then the guy says, well, will you be returning on the Queen? If you're going to pass this way again, you might want to tip a little bit better. So I think about that. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, and if you want Q&A, I'm happy to do that. I think we're probably close to out of time. But this whole, what do I get, what do I give? And I think we see, I do not buy into the millennial, the X-gen, I do not buy into that. And I'd say that Gareth is a shining example of those people at Republic that are 20-somethings. We've got high school students that are tellers. They try to be tellers. But I do think, though, that we've really got a multi-generational organization. And I go to these places and they say, oh, here's how you talk to millennials, and here's how you talk to Gen Xers, and here's, and I get to be around our bankers a lot. And I always go to Gareth or our HR people go, do I not see this? I mean, everything seems to work. Work ethics there. Are we missing something here? And our manager level people say, no, they're all really good. We don't seem to have that kind of a problem. I keep going to these meetings. I'm hearing about the millennials, and do we have any? Because I don't see that. I go, yeah, we have a lot of them. However, we hire them to make sure they would give to United Way. So maybe that's some of the difference there. So I think that really helps. And so I will just leave you with this last comment that you've heard 1,000 times before, I'm sure. But this is the mindset that we have to look for. It's that you make a living by what you get. You make a living by what you get. But you make a life by what you give. And I think if we can keep that in mind, my dad says leave happy tracks. My grandmother says, no, you don't. Not what you get, it's what you give. And that can make all the difference in the world. And those of you that are in this room, you're in this room for a reason. You're in this room because people do watch you. Even if you're not the boss, they're watching you. And so the positive impact that you can make will change the world. Thank you.